In this video, let's learn about express mode in flows while you build a Copilot Studio agent. So I'm in the Maker portal from a Copilot Studio perspective. So I'm building an agent, but suddenly I think that, oh, maybe I need to build some flows. So I click on flows and then I create a flow. Now, if you see the scenario over here, when an agent calls the flow, so this is the triggering point. Now from here, I will do some business logic and then respond back to the agent. So input, output, and this is the processing part. Now in Power Automate, if you run a flow and if you call that flow from a specific agent, now you get a limited number of time for the execution to run a prompt. Now you need to respond within that specific time period so that the agent can respond accordingly. Now from a chatbot perspective, like if a user asks for a response and if you run a Power Automate flow or like a flow in the background, the wait cannot be endless. It has to be delivered within a specific amount of time. So let's assume 2 minutes, and if you fail to do that, then there's a problem, and then the flow may return an error, or may agent may throw an error to an end user telling that something wrong has happened, or maybe the execution has not yet finished. Now, express mode, what it does, it speeds up the execution of the processing part over here. So, a flow can be in a normal mode and then in an express mode. Now, if the flow is in an express mode, then you will be able to expedite the execution of this particular action. But there are some limitations. So, let's dive deep into the express mode. Okay, so what is an express mode? So in express mode, when an agent flow fails if it takes longer than 2 minutes to respond to the calling agent or app, flow can achieve faster execution. So as I mentioned to you, like if you configure your flow in an express mode, the action component will be executed faster. So that means there's a lot of CPU involved in it. It increases the likelihood that the agent flows can complete within 2 minute window. Not necessarily, but compared to the normal mode, it will run faster. But again, if it depends on what you write in the logic of your flow. If it is too lengthy, then this may not be the right approach. Express mode works best for flows that do not move lot of data. So this point needs to you need to remember that if there's a lot of data movement which is happening between the connectors, then that's not the express mode for. If you require a processing time, if you require a lot of processing time, a quick processing time, then yes, this is the approach to take. Express mode, the flows are optimized for rapid execution, but there are some limitations. So you get to like say the action count which exists within your flow, the content size, and also like the agent flow will give you an expedited response. But then why it gives you an expedited response? Because it runs on an optimized infrastructure. Now in order to enable express mode, you need not do any specific thing, but from a prerequisite perspective, you need to have a Copilot Studio plan and an upgraded environment. So upgraded environment, it happens automatically. I will show you within my environment. In one environment there is an express mode enabled, and in another environment the express mode is not enabled. Some actions are not supported in express mode, so that it comes with a limitation. But then if your flow needs a fast execution or a rapid execution and with a limited number of actions, then you will be able to use the express mode. Now Power Automate is upgrading the environments to a new architecture. So this is important to note. There is something called a self-host multi-tenant. So there are some configuration within Power Automate. So if you see this value self-host multi-tenant, then you will be able to execute the express mode within your infrastructure, and I'll show you how to check that as well. Express mode works for triggers. So express mode doesn't work for most of the triggers, but it works for a specific set of triggers, and couple of them are when an agent calls a flow and when an app calls a flow. So take for example, you have a Power Apps, and then in the Power Apps, if you're calling that specific flow, then this is that right use case. Or if you are calling a flow from an agent or a chatbot. So when an agent calls a flow, that's a trigger. You'll be able to use express mode. Response actions in a flow. So correspondingly, if you see when an app calls a flow, you have to respond back to the app again, right? So this corresponds to this. And when an agent calls a flow, it corresponds to respond to an agent. So you have, when an agent calls a flow, you have the business logic, and then you respond back to agent. Similarly, if you are using power apps, when an app calls a flow, do the processing logic and then respond back to the app. So that complete loop is important, because you need to give that call back to the calling app or the bot or an agent. You need to have a Copilot Studio plan, and you need to have an upgraded Power Automate environment. Limitations: delay and webhook actions are not supported. No more than 100 actions in a flow run. Message size limit action is 64 kilobyte. Automatic flow testing is not supported. When I say automatic flow testing, means like when you create a flow, sometimes instead of actually that flow getting triggered, what you do is like you will just say, I want to run it uh, automatically, or from a manual perspective, or you use the recently used trigger. So those kind of things are not supported. Loop iterations don't appear in the run details. So if you have a loop, and then if you want to troubleshoot your flow and if you go into the run details, you will not see the loop iteration. So these are like some of the limitations for the express mode. How to turn on or off the express mode? There are two ways. One is at a flow level. So on the right hand side, you will see at a flow level. So here, when you edit the flow, you will see an option express mode. Currently it is in preview, but soon I believe this will go in GA. So flows in express modes are optimized for rapid execution, but come with limitations such as action count and content size. So this is at a flow level, and this one is at a trigger level. So when an agent calls a flow, you will be able to see an express mode preview, and then you can enable the faster flow execution. So these are like two different ways through which you can configure. When to use the express mode? When the flow is logic heavy, remember, not data heavy. So if you're transferring more information or more data from the connectors, no, that's not the use case. But if it's logic heavy, and if you need a lot of CPU power, and if you need to deliver that particular piece of code in, or execute that piece of code in faster, or say in milliseconds, or maybe you want to execute that very quickly, then go for that. Flow run execution is time sensitive. So yes, again, it translates that to the same thing. Like if it is time sensitive, then yes, definitely you need to use the express mode. When agent waits for flow to execute and get the response, and during the test execution. So that's all about express mode. So let me show you how to check the express mode settings. So uh, in Power Automate, so here in Power Automate, I'm in this Girish USA environment. Now here, in order to see the configuration, what I'll do, I'll just press Control Alt and A. So I'll press Control Alt A, and then I'll be getting some configuration related information. Now it's a huge JSON, so I'll just copy this JSON and I will put it in my uh, my tool, JSON Grid Desktop. Now here, if I search for, so let me search for environment flow hosting type. So environment flow hosting type. So if you see, environment flow hosting type is self-host multi-tenant. So that means environment is ready. This environment is ready. I can use it to run express mode. Now I have another environment. So let me go into another environment. So make dot preview.powerautomate.com. So let me go into apps and Power Automate. And this time I'm going to go in a default environment. So in the default environment, again, I'm going to check the configuration value. So let me go into default environment. So just wanted to show you that both the value exists. So again, I'll press Ctrl Alt A. I'll get the configuration information from here. Control A, Control C, put it over here, paste, and then search for environment flow hosting type. So here within this environment, so let me go back again and search for environment flow hosting type. Now if you see here, even in my default environment, that it is enabled. Now if I go into Copilot Studio, if I go into the flows, so here I can create multiple flows. I've already created one flow, so Girish agent flow. Now if you want to enable the express mode, you navigate to the specific flow or when you create that flow, and then click on edit. Now here in edit, if you scroll down here, you will see something called as an express mode preview. You have an option to turn this on over here. Alternatively, you can go into the designer and make sure that if you're using when an agent calls the flow and respond to the agent, you click on that particular trigger, and then there is an option to check the express mode and enable faster flow execution. Now if you want to see more details, click on learn more. It will take you to the learn site, and then here Microsoft has explained this article in great depth. They have given all sort of information in terms of licensing limitations, how to use, how to turn off. So it's a good resource to look into. So that's it, folks. This is all about Express Mode in Power Automate and Copilot Studio. Thanks for watching.